So we're wrapping up here and getting kind of down towards the end, but I just wanted to ask you about some questions specific to Camden and what's going on right now. So we're hearing a lot about Camden High and the potential demolition and rebuilding of Camden High. What's your take on it, and how should the mayor be involved in that issue?
There's a very difficult history when it comes to working with the state in education and building buildings. Um, and if that's any indication of how things will go, I'm very concerned about um, tearing down Camden High. Back in 2004, Lang Square School was torn down because it had structural issues. And the community was promised to have a school within 2 years. That never happened. In fact, 2009, 2010, actually 2011, the land was co-opted by a Renaissance school, and the public school was never built there again, rebuilt. Um, so, it's like, I think it was Ronald Reagan, quote Ronald Reagan, trust but verify. Um, the history when it comes to projects in government, from my understanding, I have somebody who's who's been a long bureaucrat that told me, he says, Ray, when you got the money, you got to build it. You got to put it in the ground because that money might be gone. When I heard about the land, when I hear the stories about Lanning Square School, there was this languishing. There was no decisions being made. School board wasn't doing what they had to do. This is the stories that I heard, and then the money just went away to some other priority. So you strike while the iron's hot, right? But having said that, it's important that we make a decision and we go with that decision. In my opinion, I believe that the main building should be gut and rehabbed. If you look at the Early Learning Research Academy in downtown in Camden, there was a mansion there that fronted on Cooper Street. Well, they kept the facade of that building and then built a brand new building behind it. I believe that's a fair compromise on ensuring that the historic architecture of the castle on the hill stays, but with 21st century facilities. Now, the state's going to say, "Oh, you're going to gobble up half of the money that we've allocated for that." Well, then, why don't we get our own assessments? Empower the community to get their own assessments to see exactly what it is. Because, unfortunately, there's a trust deficit. In my opinion, from my experience, there's a trust deficit when it comes to things that you receive, information you're receiving from the state. And that's just from my personal experience from being on the school board. So my advice, and as the mayor of the city, I would insert myself in that conversation to ensure that there's a fair compromise that everybody's happy with.
There's another sort of neighborhood-specific issue that's really hitting tightly in communities here in Camden, and it's the methadone clinic. So there's a methadone clinic downtown. Rutgers is buying the property. It's supposed to move to Bergen Square. There's been opposition at zoning board meetings. Is there something the mayor can do? Is there something the mayor should do? Do you have a position on it?
Yeah, well, I get to watch that circus every day. My office is my day job during the day. At Laeta, my office is on the second floor overlooking the park, Roosevelt Plaza, and the circus that is outside that methadone group. That clinic needs to leave the city of Camden, period. There are methadone clinics and services. These are fathers and sons and mothers and daughters and aunts and uncles. These are people, but they're not being served well by this particular operation. But they need to be served in the community that they come from, rather than come to the city of Camden. In a hospital setting, which is, when you do the research, the location of treatment centers like this are best in a hospital. So if we can't move it out of, the city, maybe it's best located at Cooper Hospital, where it can be properly supervised and properly managed. Otherwise, it needs to move out of the city. For 30 years, there's the not in my backyard concept, NIMBY concept. Things that nobody wanted in Camden County came to the city of Camden. The sewer plant, the trash to steam plant, the prison, methadone clinics, social service facilities, all these different things are just coming into the city of Camden. And it's ironic that now we are pitting neighborhoods against each other, which is it's just unacceptable. But my position would be to move it out. And that, now does the mayor have the veto power? Well, this mayor does, right? She can veto any minutes of any of the city council, planning board, and zoning board. So this particular mayor has the power to veto those minutes. So if it is approved, that she can veto them. But is there the political will to do that? And I think there comes a time where you need to take a stand. And everybody in Camden County and the region needs to understand that there's a new mayor in town. And we're going to do things differently. And we're going to do things that are right social justice wise and right to build the city of Camden up and make it an asset to Camden County instead of a liability.
So increasingly, we're seeing research that says African Americans have a harder time building wealth than other groups. We've spoken a little about some of the Latino population issues and particularly undocumented issues. Are there any issues here that are specific to the African American community and that you'll work with them on, or are these issues broader and sort of across the city and across some of the issues we've already spoken about?
I saw a documentary recently called 13th, which is an institutionalization of discrimination. It's so wrong, so much injustice in all this. We need to work together, and this is an African American community situation, but also a Latino situation, because once you're caught up in this system, it is set up to keep you indentured, enslaved forever. And we have to figure out strategies to keep our young people out of this system, but also reform the system, that we're not building private prisons. When there is a profit motive for incarceration, that is a dangerous thing. In Pennsylvania, you had those judges in the middle of Pennsylvania who got convicted of filling a for-profit youth detention camp, and they're building these private prisons all over the country. So that is a very dangerous thing. But we need to work on building pathways for our young people to keep them away from this system, because this system is it's debilitating. It takes our young men out of our community, our fathers out of our communities. Our young people, our children are growing up without their father figure or their mother figure in the community, and that is just so corrosive to building our community, period. So for me, it's an issue that we definitely have to address. Again, building those pathways, building those collaborations to keep our young people out of those situations. There's so many men that I've met in my journeys here, and women that are so passionate about that, keeping those young people, and they're like the beacon of light in these young people's lives, and they see these kids on to being college educated, master's degrees, professionals, and they still have trouble getting a job in the city of Camden. When I talk about these companies, I talk about entry-level jobs. We have a class of young people that are highly educated that can't get jobs. So that's another issue we have to work on with workforce development. But when it comes to the issue of mass incarceration, all these different issues, that is something we have to work on as a community, as a village, right, to address.